Hey, let's do one. Welcome to Legacy Decoded. This is the podcast where we sit down with the people building, leading, serving, and surviving at the highest levels. Here, we decode the decisions, beliefs, systems, sacrifices, and defining moments that shape a meaningful life and a lasting legacy. Because legacy is not just what you leave behind, it is what you build into people while you're still here. Today's conversation is about the people behind the mission. The veteran who returns home but cannot fully leave the battlefield behind, the driver, independent contractor who keeps businesses, family, and entire industries moving while carrying pressures most people will never see, and the leaders responsible for protecting people while still delivering results. So our guests come from different worlds, but their work meets at one powerful question. How do we build systems that do not merely use people for what they can produce, but protect the human being carrying the weight? Today we have Eric Donaldson. He brings decades of experience in logistics and is helping GigSafe create stronger infrastructure, protection, and opportunity for the independent workforce. Again, we have Mr. Greg Wark. He's a pastor, a counselor, a chaplain, and co-author of The Warfighter's Soul, a book confronting the unseen battles of trauma, depression, identity, faith, and suicide among veterans. Today we are decoding service, responsibility, and invisible wounds, and what it truly means to protect the soul behind the work. This is Legacy Decoded. I just want to say thank you both for just making some time to share this space with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I guess we can start off as we get into it. I'd just love to kind of bring both of you into it, and both of you have kind of dedicated so much of your life to, people who carry missions larger than themselves. What first made you guys recognize that the person completing the mission is often the person receiving the least protection?
Well, for me, it started the day I was invited to the Buds compound in San Diego. And as you said, I was a pastor at the time. And I was struck with the devotion and the circumstances of that kind of a military world. And it didn't take me long to realize that my calling was connected to those individuals, as well as other military people. And for 25 years, that's where I've focused my attention. One of the things I noticed working with them is they're the best of the best in every area associated with their military activity, but they often have their families are falling apart, their kids are struggling. They have serious moral issues, addiction issues, things of that nature that most people don't see because all we want to see is perfection. We don't want to look at someone and actually see what's really there.
Mm.
And I think society as a whole looks at military as this superhuman individual. And while they act in that way in most of what they do, most people don't care enough about them to ask, what can I do to help? In the book I wrote, The Warfighter's Soul, I brought up society's responsibility to the people that provide our freedoms. And it lays out the significant responsibility all of us have to support those individuals. And then I tried to be an example of what it means to support them and give a method with which we all can be involved other than to just say thank you for your service. So I think that's the quickest version I can give.
Wow. I'm impressed, Greg.
I love that.
Yeah, man. I think for me, it's strikingly similar, and I think, Greg, this is why we might get along a little bit. I grew up in a family where my grandmother's brother died in an Air Force accident after the end of World War II, and kind of grew up with that conversation. My grandfather was a naval officer and then retired essentially as a contractor with the Air Force. Kind of grew up in that environment. Huge John F. Kennedy fan. My grandfather was, and too many stories to tell from that experience. And on both sides, members of the administration under Lyndon Johnson. So there was some interesting debate across family there. But I think the most striking thing for me was my father had a really, really dear friend that was an undercover narcotics agent. And from some of my earliest childhood memories, if we saw Uncle Joe out in public, we were never allowed to say hi. We were never allowed to address him or even acknowledge his existence unless he came up and said hi to us. And I think that was such an early reminder that these men and women are living such split lives and such challenge in doing so. I think Greg illustrated, some of that perception that they're unbreakable, unfallible, yet these masks and capes that they seemingly have to wear when they do come off, right? They have friends and families and little kids that think they're heroes. They just want to walk up and say, "Hey, Uncle Joe," and for whatever reason, they can't be themselves, right? And that bar to acceptance, that bar to like daily living, can leave wounds, and even wounds on the people that love them. And I realized that at an early age, and that wasn't a realization, I don't think, for me until the last couple of years. So
I appreciate that. Greg, in your book, you describe an unseen battle for the warrior soul. What exactly is that battle?
Well, I think the battle is you're the guy that read my book. I was curious who that was. But anyway, the unseen battle is the one that goes on when the combat stops. And let me make a point that I really feel needs to be made so that the people that are watching don't feel like they're being left out if they're not military. All cultures have their perfection and the way people want to view them, and they have the reality. I work with TV people, very large groups of TV people, also music industry, business. And I think it's important to note that regardless of where you're at in society, you're probably at a place where your desire and your stress is to constantly reflect the best part of yourself. But then when you go to bed at night, the real person is there, their head is on the pillow, and you're struggling with a lot of the realities of life. So back to the question, if you don't mind that little diversion, Calais, the unseen part is that when someone is acting within the context of where their training is, when they train night and day for a purpose, and then they engage that purpose, there's a protection in the context of that engagement. And so our society applauds people engaged in that in such a manner that if you look at even TV shows or movies or things of that nature, we tend to focus on the superstardom, but we don't even come close to addressing the humanity. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's created a culture that has a significant deficiency in affirmation and empathy. And as a result, we have this negative dynamic. Now, you asked me a question, and I know I'm going off script, but not that there was one. But the bottom line of it is that I entered into the military world as a civilian. And I ask myself, what are the problems that are, and interacting with them, traveling with them, going into war zones and things of that nature. And I realize that they're at their best when they're at their best, but as soon as that downtime comes, the suffering is revealed. The PTS, I don't like using disorder. I always call it PTS, not PTSD. I don't like to give somebody a title that ends in disorder. But the PTS, the dreams, the alcoholism, the treating of what's there because of the traumatic issues that they have faced. Nobody faces the traumatic dynamic associated with serving this country more than the military men and women who serve. And they have to live with those things forever. And it's one of the reasons we've developed through Free Mind Coaching, we've developed a method to restructure those traumas and to give them peace and freedom.
Got it. And I'd like to ask Eric a question. And kind of coming off of that, Greg, when a person carries unresolved trauma, pressure, grief, shame, spiritual conflict, how does that eventually begin showing up physically?
Is that for me or for Greg?
Yeah,
Because I mean, for me, in my experience, I think it came in various ways. I mean, I think the patterns that developed could be recognized in lots of comforts, right? Well, for me, whether that was food, alcohol, choosing social activities opposed to disciplined ones like homework, for example, in school at an early age. My junior year in high school, I skipped 22 days of school, mostly on Monday because there was a country club in the neighborhood that was closed and they had great bass. So we'd go bass fishing on Monday. And thankfully, at the time, my father gave me a choice. He showed up on a Monday and the registrar's office and gave me a choice, military school or his house. And that there's a lot to unpack in that conversation, but I didn't appreciate it at the time. But that action and that interdiction changed the direction of my life, and but understanding that the decisions before that were probably needing that interdiction. Right. So, the fact that his reaction is almost exactly what I was unbeknowingly calling for, which was connection. Right. So like the way that things unfold and the way that things work almost make you wonder who's driving the ship. However, the stories we tell ourselves along this journey are very impactful, at least in my experience. And so how did we get to that clarity? Right. For me, it was getting to a place where I could try to eliminate some of those comforts or understand the difference between positive and negative without kind of giving away too much of the dirty details of me. So
Calais, one of the things about trauma is it drives the ship. So unresolved trauma drives the ship. The way that I communicate this when I speak to crowds is I put my hand in front of my face and I ask everybody to do that. And when you can actually drive your car, you can function in life with this because you can see through the cracks of your fingers. That's kind of what trauma is. Trauma presents itself with a distortion that is absolute and it is not going to go away unless it is processed. The thing about that is that the ship begins to be driven because in the morning when you wake up to comb your hair or whether you have any or not, to brush your teeth or whatever happens to be the case, you're looking at yourself through the distortion of that traumatic event. You're looking at your family when you walk in to have breakfast with them. You're looking at your children. You go into the workplace, you look at yourself through that distortion. And so it's really important to understand that if you tell me a community, if you just present to me a community, I'll tell you how that's revealed. If it's the corporate community, military community, arts community, wherever it happens to be, there is trauma trying to determine what is done or isn't done. But it's important to understand that while we can't avoid trauma, we can avoid traumas driving the ship. We just have to process it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you reference the art community. I mean, your work compares healing to like a museum curator restoring like a damaged work of art. The artwork may be scarred, neglected, or removed from its original context, but its value was never erased initially. How does that
That's right.
metaphor apply to, someone who feels broken or no longer recognizes who they've become?
Well, I like to take this one for just a second, and then Greg. I think the biggest lie we've all been told is that we're not good enough. And I'll just stop there, right? From birth, we've all been unworthy of something. So,
Yeah,
Greg?
that's very helpful. Um I think it's so I have a program that is called Free Mind Coaching, and called a PPP. I It's called Power, Pattern, and Purpose. So it's the way that we help people restructure trauma from here to the memory, because you can never just act like trauma has not happened, but you can make it a strength. And I know that there are people watching right now that need that understanding. They're hopeless. They believe they've tried everything. They've been through 10 years of therapy. It hasn't worked. Our program is designed to work within 8 weeks, and the whole idea behind it, and by the way, I'm not selling the program, I'm simply stating what we do on a daily basis, is that we walk people through. So all trauma takes power from the traumatized. It's important to understand that. So if it happens to be, let's say, molestation, you take purity and security. That trauma takes those two elements away from that individual. If you're looking at physical abuse, it develops a father negative or a mother negative, or there's all sorts of different places we can go with this that you haven't asked me about it, so I won't go there. But what we do in the first iteration of our program is we return the power to the traumatized. And a lot of times, the reason we see people who are ineffective and literally catatonic in life is because they have no hope that their circumstances will ever feel any different than they do at this moment. And that's not true. It's one of the reasons why we're trying to get out our program to the veteran community, because we're losing 22 veterans a day to suicide. Well, why would someone commit suicide who has been adept and absolutely a master at doing the things they do in the military? Well, number one, they're not afraid to kill themselves because they lost that when they trained. But number two, they've lost complete hope. The VAs gave me 164 drugs. I've been through VA counseling. I've been through microdosing psychedelics. I've been through this and that. And it all leaves me with the same situation. It leaves me right back where I started. And that is not the end. It's important that anybody who is at that place right now, that you know that there's hope for you. And we're here to offer you that hope. I don't know, Calais, if that helped at all, but
Yeah, absolutely. I believe there's a principle um, in this type of work that says you can't really give what you don't have. How does an unhealed leader, parent, veteran, or operator unintentionally pass their wounds into the people or systems around them?
well, I mean, that's one. Let's use a veteran as an example. In World War II, you used to take 2 months on a ship before you ended up with your family. And during that time, you had your brothers and sisters where you could communicate a lot of the things that had happened, you begin to work through some of the thoughts and some of the issues. Well, today, some of our most powerful special operation communities will leave in a morning, and in 2 days, they're back sitting in front of their families after having conducted some of the most horrendous things that you could do and what happens is that the family says, Daddy's home, and everybody gets a hug, but Daddy's feeling some things that he's trying to push down. And the wife is connected to that much more than the kids are, but everybody expects Daddy to be just Daddy. And Daddy also expects Daddy to be Daddy. So what's really important here is to recognize that Daddy is going to develop an alter ego, burying the things that are going on, and he's going to act. But when he lays his head down on that pillow at night, he can't act anymore. He's who he is. And what happens, remember this, and this is important, and I'll let Eric talk, but we communicate by word, by gesture, and by spirit. Those are the three elements we communicate, not just by what we say, but we communicate by our gestures. And one of the things that we do a lot of teaching about is the area of being able to read gestures. Wives are good with husbands, husbands are good with wives, but in the context of trauma, gesture and spirit reveal a great deal more than words. And so what we do is we communicate this, what we really are, to the people around us. And our kids start to sense things that they don't understand and are not capable of dealing with. Our wife begins, or our husband begins to sense things that they don't understand and they can't put into words. And that leaves the residue. Then you have the other element, which is Daddy's drinking, or Daddy's angry, or Daddy just walked out the door, or like a veteran I just counseled, his wife's afraid to go to bed with him because he wakes up in nightmares. And those nightmares are how he had to put together 16 bodies of his friends after an event. So that's how it affects. It's impossible to come home and act like you're normal when you just had to do something that was completely abnormal. Mm. And as a result, it infects, and I hate to use that word because these individuals don't do it on purpose. Daddy's mad, Daddy's this, they don't do it on purpose. They don't have a mechanism to figure out how, or to be coached how to restructure that traumatic experience so that when they are home, they're the best that they can be.
And this is where Greg's connection to my journey impacts on you can't give what you don't possess. And so from, my connection with Greg is through a Navy SEAL that I had known for 15 years and was a brother of mine. And our connection was because, the Navy rejected me in high school because I had a knee surgery. And I gave them my soul, meaning I let them push me away and they won. And that I've been carrying with me way too long, right? And so finding a way to actually do what I wanted to do, to be all that I could be in all the funny senses of that statement has been important to me because it's really truly aligned with my purpose and my beliefs from a child, right? And being in close proximity with the highway patrol work that I've done and the folks that I love in that community, and watching their training and knowing the game warden system and the highway patrol system and knowing what the media does from a law enforcement perspective. But the one story that's often forgotten, and the highway patrol and the game warden system is very important to illustrate this. They have to get home to their families every night, and they are oftentimes by themselves in rural and very distant areas. So they have no backup. They have a very limited QRF or quick reaction force. So they have inept, deep training around survival, right, in those incidents. And they happen far more often than one might imagine, right? A simple roadside stop, right, with all the narcotics activity that's been going on in Texas, right? A simple roadside stop turns into something very, very nefarious. And not because, these police officers are out there to try to, have malicious intent because of somebody's race or religion or creed or social status. It's because they're doing bad things like trafficking drugs to kill people or trafficking children and women. And it's real, and that's happening, and it's awful. And there are people out there trying to interdict and stop it. And as a result, they're getting in terrible, terrible, scary incidents. And I had a friend of mine that was in one, right? And I watched it. I watched him have to go home that night to his family and carry the weight of that experience and go through, the feelings and the emotions that Greg talks about. And nobody should have to do that alone. And so, for 13 years to be idealizing and thinking about a way in which we can offer, some sort of solutions to these people, and then being able to experience what the power pattern purpose process can do for me, even in my journey and my past, we're going to make this happen for anybody that wants to receive it. It's too powerful.
Clay, before you ask your next question, I wanted to explain that when Eric mentions power, pattern, purpose, that's the program. But it's easily explained. All trauma takes power. And what happens from that is we develop patterns that are all negative. They're coping mechanisms to deal with what has taken the power of whatever the trauma has done. It's taken power. And then the patterns. So we deal with not just the power part, but we deal with the patterns that have resulted through alcoholism, anger, all the different, you could fill in all those blanks, suicidal ideations, things of that nature. We deal with those patterns, secondly. And the last part is purpose. One of the things that most people don't connect it with is the reason that they're unable to see their purpose on earth is because they're walking in a pattern so much so that they've dug themselves into a ditch, and they are so deep in the ditch they can't see outside of it. And that is something we can help them with. And it's amazing when you see these people after going through our program, they're able to literally, their life gets changed literally within weeks. And they begin to do these things that they never thought they'd ever be able to do.
Yeah.
That's the purpose side. Eric, you're smiling.
I'm laughing because I have a CEO. He's a friend, and all of my clients are friends, I guess, in some way. But they, my wife and I were having lunch with them not too long ago, and we were talking about the repetitiveness and the power of the process that we are talking about. So I believe, he's in his 70s now, successful CEO, multi-time founder. And I have the privilege of working with him in a variety of different ways. And in our recent conversation, his time in jail came up at 19. And during that 7 or 8 week period, he was molested or raped in jail every day. And he had completely forgotten and shut that part out of his life until about the age 60, 58, 60 years old. And there were so many things in his life that he started coming back and recognizing from that experience that he had completely shut out. And it was recognizing that even if you have healed or you've come to terms, there may be times, there may be something like this stuff can get rooted, right? We talk about an 8-week process, but the reality is that it's a process. And that, I think, is the real powerful part about this being coaching, because our goal is not to stick somebody on a couch for years and years. It is to give you a tool to live life on life's terms, which, I think if anybody has spent time in recovery, that's a common term, right? But there's truth in that, right? Like, why? Because it's real, right? Like, this is simply a process to give you tool. AI is nothing new. It's data that's being given to you in a consumable way. It's a tool, right? So we're trying to give you a tool to live, and live with peace and joy and purpose. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, I think we live in a culture built around, just relief. We want the pain gone, the pressure reduced, the comfort silent. I think real restoration kind of asks a harder question, though. What
Well,
is
Greg, you should talk about that book. You don't talk enough about that one.
the good?
That's my favorite. That's my favorite Greg Wark book.
Yeah, that book is all about how to live life in such a way that you achieve a good death.
I feel like sometimes, feeling better kind of helps us return to the same environment that kind of broke us. Getting better may require us to kind of change environments, relationships, habits, or the identity, we've kind of been living from. Greg, I wanted to know, when when we think about identity, what role does that actually play in restoration? Before someone can actually recover, do they first have to separate who they truly are from what happened to them?
That's a really good question. And it's above my pay grade. No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually in the middle of writing a book called The War for Identity. And my last book was The Warfighter's Soul. So I figured, but there is a war for identity these days, and you can see it being played out everywhere, especially in our young people who don't know who they are sexually. They don't know they have no concept of what's right and what's wrong. There's all these filters, or there's all these identities that are not even real identities. I think to answer your question, I think that the issue of identity is probably foremost in culture's battle today. And if identity isn't offered as it should be, it will be invented for what it should not be. And that represents a significant social problem, is that we do not have enough people living in their God-given purpose to represent a God-given identity. And in the absence of that, the devil, who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, offers significant groups of people the alternative, which always produces one thing: it goes against everything God created man to be. And that's vital, and that is important. It's one of the things. I mean, just yesterday, I had a man who was finishing the program with me at my ranch, my wife's horse trainer, and he was 66 years old. And think about this: this man, he was successful, But during this program that we took him through, he became identified with God's identity for him, as opposed to the identity that he had embraced. And I think it's important that we understand sometimes we do have to set aside what we've seen ourselves as or how we've identified in the past in order for us to see the truer part of ourselves. The key is that it is possible. Yeah, is it a struggle? I think most people today insulate themselves from difficulty, from pressure, from stress. They, they don't want anything that represents pressure at all. And the reality of it is we live in a world that is adept at providing pressure. Without pressure, we are not formed. We're not forged. We're not developed into the person that we're supposed to be. Insulated people don't grow. They don't develop. They have a false world and they don't grow in their faith. That is for sure. So I hope that answered your question, probably a little over the top.
I love that. Eric, when companies kind of design, benefits, protections, support systems, are they merely helping people survive, or can those systems actually help people live and work from a place of greater wholeness?
I think that question is very dependent on the true purpose of the organization that's setting up those systems. So I think that, I'll use a popular one, unlimited PTO, right? So unlimited PTO, what is the true purpose of unlimited PTO?
I didn't even know that.
Because, right? Yeah. So unlimited PTO, right? The idea is great, but in practice, is it reality? Is it truly unlimited PTO? So like there's, you have to recognize, I think mathematically, I think it's known, right? The system with the most flexibility is always going to win, but it's going to create chaos. Mm-hmm. So you have to have structure, but structure that can allow some nimble, right, is going to remain a quality rich. For me, I come from a world where quality is important in healthcare logistics. So a quality rich, but flexible enough, but and remain in truth. And that to me is the pinnacle for organizational success, is really understand the purpose, build towards the purpose. Look, if you're here to make all the money that you can because you just want to get rich, great. But I have found that nothing selfish sells. Right. And so you got to have some other purpose, right? Your purpose has got to be something bigger than yourself. And when you have the organization understand that and then build systems that supply an outlet to serve that purpose, all the other things come with it. Now legal, right? Now you have legal structure and corporate and all of that. And now you really have to understand, right, the purpose, because in purpose, you could be playing a game, right? The objective in a soccer game is to score as many points as you can, right? So you're going to set up the structure towards the objective and towards the purpose. And so my challenge for any business leader is to be rigorously honest about what are you here to serve, and how do we set up honest, truthful processes and systems to help you obtain that objective, right? Mm-hmm. And some of those conversations are rather difficult because being honest with oneself is a painful conversation at times, right? But this process folds right into that conversation, whether it's your personal life or your business life. And I think that, to me, has been the biggest area of impact for the people that I've been able to work with. around decisions and understanding the power that they possess in the decisions that they hold.
I love that. Just a few more questions, Greg. Before we wrap up, your philosophy speaks about returning people to their original God-designed selves. What does that mean for someone who feels as though trauma permanently changed them?
Well, the message that, well, trauma does permanently change someone, but it doesn't permanently limit them, or at least it doesn't have to. So, as a matter of fact, trauma can actually be empowering. We've seen that absolutely clearly. I have people that are telling their testimonies and stories all over the country who have lived through unthinkable difficulty, unthinkable trauma, and yet they look at it as an opportunity once they've gone through it. Remind me of the question again, because I got myself off track.
Yeah, the philosophy of your teachings speak more about like returning people to their original
Right.
God designed selves and state. What does that again mean for someone who feels as though trauma kind
And
of
it's limited. Well, I think it's important right now that I use this soapbox to make a point, and that is that if you go to churches or you go to meetings or you go to things, Tony Robbins meetings or coaching things, there's nothing in this society that's more talked about than purpose. Books are being written on it, and yet less faith-filled people understand what that means than ever. They're not really introduced to purpose. They're introduced to guilt or deficiency. There's a walking away from that comment that you have a purpose. Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thanks for that. I'll live with that for a week, and then I'll hear it again, and I'll live with the guilt that I'm not in my purpose for another week. It's not achievable. It's a problem that we have to face and look at. It's the way I read scriptures. I always read scripture in such a way that I ask questions. So if Jesus asked to be baptized, I'm going to want to know, why does a perfect man, a sinless man, need to be baptized? Well, I have that same rule here. Why does someone need to go to therapy for 5 years? Tell me that. Somebody answer me that question. Why does someone hear about purpose and pay $10,000 to hear about it and walk away not knowing their purpose? And in 4 months, they're back to wanting to pay someone else to talk to them about purpose. The problem is clear. What's the answer? We have to remove the obstacle that is residing in the soul, deep within the soul. We have to confront the one thing that keeps men and women from producing what God placed them on this earth to produce. And that is to restructure that trauma and put them in a position where their vision is clear regarding where God can lead them and God can direct them. And so I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Eric, for someone who may not know what their purpose is or, might be trying to figure that out, what is the best way for them to kind of be able to, discover their purpose essentially?
Well, I would start with asking some questions. And I would definitely start with some self-evaluation. And some of that would be around, how do you spend your day and how do those activities feel when you look at the mirror? So for me, my journey really started with waking up and looking at myself in the mirror and being very unsatisfied with the person that was looking back at me. And I knew that the person looking back at me was not the person that I was. And that the only way that could change it was here. Right. And so I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that. And so I'll illustrate it with alcohol. So I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 8 years. I have a lot of other problems in life, challenges and opportunities. Cheeseburgers being one of them, but In-N-Out burger. Yeah. Oh, we got P. Terry's here in Texas, which is pretty good. But
okay.
Oh man, we'll get you a cheap old P. Terry's burger. You can't beat it. But for me, every negative life event, major negative life event, alcohol was involved. It wasn't necessarily always me drinking it, but it was always in the room, in the conversation. And so I can remove that denominator. Right. And so, that's where that conversation started. And it wasn't really until I was able to put the entire package together to really understand that was the start of the process that I needed in order to put me on this journey. And I don't know if you ever truly find the ultimate answer to that. Right. But I know that nobody's going to be arguing on my behalf when it shuts down. And I'm okay with that. Right. I know that I'm at peace. And that I know that I have a way to show up every single day and live life in a manner in which I can be proud of myself. And that's all that matters.
I love that. Last question, Greg. You said something that really struck my interest was when you said, why does Jesus need to be baptized? Can you kind of expound on that for me a little bit?
Sure. So when I look at scripture and I look at it from the perspective that there's not a single act that Jesus ever did that did not have an eternal message attached to it. Okay? So nothing is obscure. Going into the desert right after he got baptized, going into the desert and meeting Satan, everything attached to that has a message. But going back to this, so when Jesus said, John baptized me, John said, sorry, Lord, but you should be baptizing me. And actually, John was right, with exception to, he wasn't looking at it from an eternal message point of view. He's looking at it from a personal view at that time, in that moment. And the Lord looked at John and said, you're going to baptize me. Now, we all know that baptism is connected to a regeneration. So we go under the water as a sinner. We come out of the water resurrected. So the whole idea behind the experience is regeneration, and gives us a new start, which is something very significant. But Jesus did not need to be regenerated. So what did he need? What was the Godheads, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? What was the goal of the Godhead in baptizing Christ? And we can only answer that by what happened as a result. Christ went under the water, and as he came out of the water, a voice came from heaven, and the earth shook. And the voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Now, it's important to note that in order for Jesus to accomplish what he was there to accomplish, he needed the affirmation of the Father. And when I look at that, I realize that in order for me, I'm a 70-year-old dude. And in order for me to accomplish what I'm here on earth to accomplish, I need not only the affirmation of the Father, which is first and foremost, but affirmation needs to be part of what I feed on a daily basis. So there's a whole message, life message, that is there by Christ being affirmed by the Father. And the first act that he did as he walked away from that affirmation was he went to face the most evil, the greatest evil in human history that will ever exist, and overcame him simply because he had the affirmation of the Father and the power of the Holy Spirit present with him as he did his calling.
So what I'm taking away from this conversation is, I think, pretty simple. A person can look strong, productive, dependable, and still be kind of fighting a war nobody else can see.
That's right.
We build cultures that reward endurance. We celebrate the person who keeps showing up, the leader who holds everybody else together. But strength was never, supposed to mean suffering and silence, essentially.
Right.
So real wholeness kind of means the body, the soul, the spirit are no longer pulling in opposite directions. Real restoration is not pretending the damage never happened either.
That's right.
Eric and Greg, thank you for just bringing your wisdom, your experience, your heart to this conversation. And to everyone listening, check on the strong people in your life. As we close out, is there, for the people that are listening, Greg and Eric, what is it that you would actually want them to know?
I want people to know that there is no use in wishing another life for yourself that belongs to another. Like, don't look at another person and, man, I wish I was like that guy. Man, I want that, right? Because unless you're willing to take everything that it is to walk in Greg's shoes and to be him, you have an opportunity to create your own journey. You have everything inside of you to create exactly the story that you choose to live. That's my message. So don't desire somebody else's life. Let's create the life that you own, that you want for yourself. That's my message.
Mine would be wholeheartedly, God didn't create you to tend a grave. He called you to do something great. And that is not those are not my words. They're his words. God is not a liar. If God says you have the measure of faith, all of us have a measure of faith, and that measure of faith is consistent with whatever God places on this earth to accomplish. So he's essentially saying you have all that's needed. If God were to call us to do something and not give us the full power and ability to accomplish that, that would be child abuse. And our God is not a child abuser. So whatever has taken your hope away, whatever has taken your belief in yourself, I don't care right now if you're in a prison. I don't care if you're a drug addict. It doesn't matter if you are addicted to something you can't get free of. Whatever the restriction, the Bible's clear about us as human beings. We will face tribulation. You're doing exactly what happens in this world. Jesus said, you're going to have peace through me, but in the world, you're going to have tribulation. Engage someone who is capable of helping you through this process, but engage them with an intent. The intent is that I don't want to just be inspired. I have to find something. And that's my encouragement to you. Start the journey to finding the real you.
Absolutely. I'm Kale Poteet. This is Legacy Decoded, where we uncover the beliefs, battles, and decisions that shape the life we live and legacy we leave. Until next time, I encourage everyone to build something that actually heals. Thank you both for sharing the space with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome, you guys. That was great.
Thank you, Colette.